Hello everybody and welcome to today's episode of the Royal Blue Podcast. I'm sure it's going to be a rather upbeat podcast after last night's terrific 3-0 win over Newcastle. I'm your host Conor O'Neill, joined today by Gav Buckland, Chris Beesley and Joe Thomas to look back on Everton's victory over Eddie Howe's side at Goodison Park and of course look ahead to Sunday's big game against Chelsea. But lads, there is only one place to start and that is at Goodison Park on Thursday night. We often say Goodison under the floodlights, it rocks, it moves. Joe, last night had done all that and more as Everton storms with 3-0 victory.
What a win. That's all I can say. There are so many different talking points and tangents we can go off on and, compare it to, the stark contrast with when Newcastle came in April and the desolation that we all felt after that game. You compare that to the feeling, after yesterday and it couldn't be a starker contrast, but just what a win and just what a feeling to be walking out of that stadium knowing that less than 1 month after being hit with the greatest points deduction in top flight history, Everton are already out of the relegation zone. As I wrote in my match report, and after the asterisk is not an anchor, and what a bloody amazing feeling that is.
Gav, we were talking before we come on air and you said that was the best Goodison performance you've seen since they beat Manchester City 4-0 under Ronald Koeman. What was so good about it?
What was so good about it? That we played well. It was also good that we played. Not only we played well, I thought we played well for 90 minutes. We started well, and I get what everybody said after 60 minutes, thinking we've seen this before 5 or 6 times with Goodison this season. So it was soon, as soon as McNeil scored, I think the first goal, I said before we came on air that it reminded me very much in atmosphere and the performance of beating Manchester City 4-0. A similar game where we didn't have the bulk of possession, but in the second half, the excitement built. And like City, we were winning 2-0, I think, till late on. And then Tom Dave scores, the excitement goes up a little bit. And then I think Lookman scored an injury time, didn't he? And that was a bit like last night, wasn't it? Where as soon as McNeil goes, the excitement and the passion, rose. And then we scored another. And then we scored like against City, scored the goal deep in injury time. And I think it was a combination of things. But we played well. Ultimately, that was what pleased me. And we got that home performance. I know we beat Bournemouth 3-0. We've been waiting for that all season, haven't we, really, in terms of, converting chances into goals against a quality team. And yeah, it was spot on. And not many over the last even 10 years, really.
We will talk about the psychological aspects of moving out the relegation zone and stuff like that. But Chris, how important was it that Everton won last night? Because I think to Joe about after 70 minutes in the press box and was kind of like, I don't know kind of how this is going to end here because Everton have chance after chance after chance. And I thought around the hour mark, Everton looked a little bit tired. Newcastle started to get back into it. Obviously, Gordon had that chance where he pounced on James Tarkowski's mistake. But Everton found a way to get over the line. And in the end, it was quite emphatic, but just finds a way to get over the line and get that first Premier League, get that burden off your back is a huge achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, as Joe said, the contrast to the corresponding fixture last season, there was always a huge incentive for Everton. Last night, after building on the result and the performance at Nottingham Forest, they were an opportunity. They knew that they would be out of the relegation zone should they be able to beat Newcastle United. So, yeah, it was frustrating, like we said, for a long time. It was positive because they were carving out all those chances, and let's not forget Dwight McNeil had a really inviting chance himself in the first half. He probably should have got a second goal in 2 games a bit earlier on. He missed one. Calvert-Lewin had a clutch of chances, including that volley from close range. I think he really should have been back with a goal. So the longer it went on, we're thinking, oh, here we go again. It's going to be another frustrating night. Get hit by the sucker punch. But I think just the momentum totally changed. Once Dwight McNeil did put Everton ahead, I mean, there's no guarantee it was going to finish 3-0, but I think you had that feeling that, this is going to be an Everton win now. This is going Everton's way. And, they finished with a flourish.
How big, Joe, is that kind of Everton getting in the ascendancy and going one front and then carrying on going for the kill? Obviously, they end up getting 2 and end up getting 3 because we've seen in recent time where they perhaps go in front and panic a little bit and sit back and defend. Last night, there was none of that. They pounced and they took the chances when they come. How important is that to even Everton side that they didn't sit 1-0? I think we're just going to need to grind this out now. They went for the kill and got it.
Yeah, well, we know under Dyche that Everton have never lost a game after going 1-0 up, and they've never won a game after going 1-0 down. So, I mean, the first goal is as important as it could possibly be under Sean Dyche. I think that, I agree with what you're saying in the sense that after Everton got the lead, they carried on pushing, and so often, like Brighton and other games, we've seen them almost sit back and just. I almost. Part of me wonders how much of that was actually on purpose and how much was just driven by the momentum in the stadium. After they got that goal, Goodison was electric, and I think that it wasn't just what it did in the stands, that goal, but it was the belief that it kind of injected into the veins of the Everton players, but also the disbelief in the Newcastle players. I think it was a bit of a psychological blow for Newcastle. They're a side that we know is a very good side, a very capable side, and a side that even with the injuries that they have at the moment, has still been pulling off some very impressive results. But they probably got to that hour mark and thought we'd ridden the storm here, and I think we all thought we've seen this story before. It was quite telling, I think, that around the key moments around that hour mark probably came from Gordon and Trippier. Gordon missed a good opportunity. It was clear he was having an increasing impact on that game. It almost became a battle between Gordon and Everton's defence and Pickford for about 5 minutes, but he didn't take the chances. And then obviously it was Trippier who gave away the ball, slipped for Dwight McNeil to pounce on and then score. So I think it was the timing of the goal was important. Obviously what that goal did to the crowd, but also what it did on the pitch probably had a greater say in than anything that Dyche had intentions-wise in the dugout, because it just created a surge of momentum behind Everton and that belief, and all of a sudden the pressure's become that bit sharper, and then you see the second goal. Same thing happens again. It was Harrison pressing Trippier, and it's another Trippier mistake. And I think that's, obviously this is about Everton, but I think that's probably quite telling of where Newcastle at the moment, because when you think of Gordon and Trippier, they're probably two of the players that most personally feel responsibility for what Newcastle are doing, and the fact that they couldn't make any inroads against an Everton side that was stubborn and stood in their way, and for large parts that game was better than them. You saw it all come crashing down, and so often, including when Newcastle came to Everton in April, we've seen that the reverse of that happen. Everton, including in that game, be competitive for large periods of games, but then when they concede that first goal, especially under Lampard, it probably correcting this is probably the biggest improvement that Dyche has made, albeit haven't come back to get a win. But that collapse after going 1-0 behind doesn't happen very often. Obviously, it happened at Aston Villa. It hasn't happened again this season for Everton. And it was quite refreshing to see, and it was quite refreshing for probably the first time this season, and probably the first time against a really good side under Sean Dyche, to see Everton expose the psychological fragility of somebody else and pounce on it and go for the kill and be ruthless. And then all of a sudden, those chances they're missing in the first half, like those chances they're missing against Manchester United and countless other times at Goodison Park so far this season, all of a sudden they were going in. And, it's just incredible what that first goal, because I think that goal did kind of come out of nothing. Say Newcastle were in the ascendancy, Everton had played out the script that we'd seen time and time again, and then it comes from a mistake from Trippier, Dwight McNeil, a fitting goal scorer, I think, under Dyche, and as was Doucoure. And then after that, the rest is history, and it was just really, really good to see Everton be so clinical.
We are broadcasting on Facebook Live, so if you do have any questions, please send them over. And we've already had one from Anne-Marie Brunford. Gav, you can answer this one. Who scored the best goal last night?
I think it'd be the first or third, wouldn't it? Really? Oh no, actually, because the second one we did was good team. Yeah. Have you got? How much have we got? How long have we got here? I would say the first goal is always important for us at home, isn't it? As Joe was saying, we don't lose when we score first, and you're thinking that you same old story. So I would go with the first goal, because. And it was a great goal by McNeil. He's a lovely slicer of the ball, isn't he? And we worked hard, yeah. And my daughter texted me before our time and said, wish he had the right foot, because every time he crosses the ball, he's so left-footed, and so he's out. Why can't he use his right foot and then curl it towards the goal? Then she texted me after the game, I'd take it all back. So but they were all, different goals. Second goal, pressed so hard, didn't we? Harrison, complete miss kick by McNeil. It was a bit like Moyes Keane that time at Watford. Do you remember when Walcott scored the winner? Didn't he? Keane miskicked them through everybody. So that was it. That was another goal in a great goal in a different way. And the third goal, 29 passes, wasn't it? And good finish by Beto. So they were all different goals, but I'd go for the first because that was the most important one, I think, on the night. And so I'm going to go with that, but there's an argument that any of the three could have done it.
Chris, I think one of the big things as well last night, we've got to give Sean Dyche credit, because I think when the team news dropped and James Garner was obviously missing due to illness, and you start looking at the team, obviously Seamus Coleman comes in at right back, and Ashley Young moves a little bit further forward, and Jack Harrison goes into the number 10 role, perhaps behind Dominic Calvert-Lewin, with Doucoure moving back and alongside Garner Gay. I think everyone started to get a little bit nervous, perhaps, and thought, oh, the worst fears of a couple of injuries and a couple of suspensions, and, a bit of unavailability leaves this Everton team looking very short. But the way Sean Dyche set everything up last night was superb, because I thought Harrison and Young especially were superb.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have our team selected, don't we, in the Echo, where we don't try and second guess what Sean Dyche's going to do, but we go what we do.
No, we tell what Sean Dyche
will do. Tell him, okay, all right. And so some people online, they all have a go, and maybe nobody could have predicted that 11 last night. I mean, it was only a late illness to James Garner there that meant that the reshuffle, and it left us wondering just what they were going to do. I mean, in the end, he actually did. He made the choice where it was the least changes in terms of the shape of the team, didn't he? Because we wondered, is he going to be moving Ashley Young centre mid, somewhere he's hardly ever played in his career, or is he going to be using Coleman as like a third centre back? But in the end, it was moving obviously Young up to the right wing, and then Harrison is going into the Doucoure role, with Doucoure moving back. So it kept the shape of the side the same, but obviously there were a lot of different sort of roles for the players who were in there. I mean, Ashley Young's played in that position a lot earlier on in his career, so he's used to that. But he's 38 years of age now, and then obviously Doucoure went and played deeper, but still got his goal, still Johnny on the spot. But I think amongst it all, it's probably Jack Harrison who deserves the most credit, because he's just been an out and out winger since he came to the club, and he provided that supply line of balls. I think there was a couple to Calvert-Lewin, a nice one. We slipped him in. Calvert-Lewin should have done better with that one. It was a cross. And then obviously, like I said, his role in the actual goals that were scored. I mean, so yeah, a lot of people, as Dyche spoke about it, didn't he, Joe, at the end of the game, the minimum of fuss, people just got on with the job. But I think Jack Harrison's probably the one who deserves the most credit for playing in quite a different role. And we saw with Arnott Danjuma, he struggled in that role when he came in for the Carabao Cup tie against Burnley, and with Doucoure possibly going to the Africa Cup of Nations in the new year. It is a dilemma for Everton how they sort of cope with that, but we were given some sort of more encouraging answers in that respect last night, and the fact that Jack Harrison shows he can play almost as that second striker or knit the midfield between the front line.
When we talk, Joe, about praising players, though, and I don't think there's probably enough ways to describe how important he is to Everton Football Club, and has been to Everton Football Club over the years. But Seamus Coleman just continues to prove people wrong, doesn't he? Because time and time again, when it looks like the end might be in sight a little bit, age is catching up for him, injuries, stuff like that, he just comes back and slots in as if like he's never been away. And last night, I know we come off just after the hour mark, but for that hour, he was absolutely superb.
Yeah, he was very, very good again. And I think Seamus Coleman was the last minute introduction. So James Garner got pulled out of the plans just after lunchtime on Thursday with his sickness bug. And as a result, they had the reshuffle, and none of us guessed how he was quite going to line up Dyche after that. And you mentioned Arnott Danjuma there, Chris. Obviously, Danjuma may well argue that his strongest position is playing off as a striker like Calvert-Lewin. So for him to not get the nod is probably quite telling. It's almost as big as any selection of the team that was on the pitch. It's clear that there doesn't appear to be a huge amount of faith there in Danjuma and what he can do. So, and just in relation to Doucoure probably isn't going to the African Cup of Nations, but Guy probably is. So there still is a few question marks about the middle of the pitch for Everton. But yeah, I mean, I kind of noted it. I was watching, Seamus Coleman lined up against Anthony Gordon at the start, and you thought it was a real interesting battle. One of the things I quite liked with Coleman, and we haven't seen it so much from Young, and obviously they're both of a similar age now, is that even in the very early stage of the game at 0-0, and even knowing that he's got Anthony Gordon just on the outside of him, Coleman was really, really keen to push forward. He was doing it in the first 10 minutes. He was doing it on the outside channel. He was doing it inside of Young as well when he could. And what that was doing was it was forcing Anthony Gordon further back as well. But I was watching them just around 7th or 8th minute, and I think Newcastle had a goal kick, and Coleman was marking Gordon, and in the space of about 30 seconds, he must have turned and looked at it about 8, 9, 10 times. So the awareness of where he was just phenomenal. And probably the biggest credit you can give to Coleman is that, we know that the form that Anthony Gordon's been in recently, and after 20 minutes, Eddie Howe switched flanks. Gordon was getting such little change after Coleman. This is a bloke in his mid-30s who hasn't kicked a competitive ball for the first team since he got pulled off with knee ligament damage in May. And Gordon got such a little change out of him. They switched flanks with Almer on, so they could try and give him a go at Mikalenko instead, and that says it all. And obviously, he came off a little bit earlier. Dyche after the game said it was a minor situation. He thinks Coleman's one of the players that's going to be assessed today, but there's hope that that's only a short, it's a small issue. So he might be in contention for Chelsea, and it gives Sean Dyche something to think about. We speculated a lot. I don't think it's been too controversial to say that Ashley Young's had a difficult season at right back.
Especially his plays with pace.
Yeah, and we've been saying, some of us have been saying for some time that Nathan Patterson surely is in line for an opportunity. And then since Coleman's come back again, we've then speculated, is Coleman the opportunity for Dyche to change at right back but save face and not being seen to climb down over Patterson? And that may well be the case going forward. Obviously, we'll see how Coleman recovers from the issue of caught off, but he ran off the pitch, and for those who were still there just after the final whistle, after the shenanigans in the centre circle, it come down. I caught it on camera, so you can look on my Twitter and see it. There's a moment when Coleman goes from the halfway line to the edge of the box in front of the Gladys, just charges at them, gives it the big fist pump that the fans, obviously everybody responded well to, and that the manner in which he ran sprinted those 20 yards would suggest to me that he hasn't got a serious injury from those days. And that was a nice show. It's lovely to see him on the pitch. But again, the last time we saw him on the pitch for Everton's first team was when he was coming up, when he was giving fist pumps from a stretcher at the King Power. To fast forward that and see the next time, see him giving fist pumps in celebration to Goodison on such a momentous night, emphatic win against very talented opposition. One of the many, many satisfying elements of a really enjoyable, memorable night.
Alan Jones, Gav watching on Facebook, believes Sean Dyche is doing a great job. And when you think of not just where Everton were around this, well, not this time last year exactly as the World Cup was being played, but at the start of football in December when the Wolves game, and when you think back to that Newcastle game in April when it was a night where I think we all thought the Sky Bet Championship was looming for Everton. It's quite a turnaround, isn't it? And it is down to Sean Dyche and the way he's got this team set up.
Absolutely. Can I just talk about Jack Harrison for a minute, though?
The floor's yours.
Yeah, absolutely. On Monday, we were talking about the difference between us, trying to get wins at home and what's different to our home form to away form. And I think one of the reasons for that has been is at home, you've got to be a little bit more creative and insightful, haven't you? Because the opposition will probably sit deep, but probably a bit more defensive. And what we've lacked for several years is like that number 10 player. Well, not even number 10 player, it's just a creative influence behind the strike. We've not had one there for a long time. I know Doucoure does a job. He's not that player. And Danjuma, as you say, he's not that player. But last night, it was obvious to me immediately. Playing Jack Harrison there, who's more naturally a forward player, but he's not a pacey player. He relies on instinct, doesn't he, and vision, and can see 10 or 20 yard passes into space and into people's feet. He's far more suited to that role than Doucoure and Danjuma, and that was noticeable last night. I think we lost something in that because he's not a natural midfield player. There's times where he should have came back, and there was like a lot of space in the first half. I felt on occasions, but I think he of the three is more naturally suited to that role. That's a long-term thing is open to debate. And I can't remember the question now, but I just think it's a point worth making. It's about Dyche, wasn't it?
Yeah. More of a statement from Alan Jones says he believes Sean Dyche is doing a great job.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it does Dyche and the players at the service when people say, "Oh, Everton are motivated because of the 10-point deduction, and we're only doing this because we're."
Imagine the beat is not that 10 points.
Yeah. You know what I mean? As if all this is because we we've got a chip on our shoulder and we've got to prove people wrong and it's Everton against the world. I don't think it's that at all. I think good management by Dyche and the coaching staff, it can take a bit of time to work through to players last year, and I don't think where we were last year that it was a case you could do that. You just had to go from game to game last year. Couldn't put any long-term plans in. And this start of the season was probably something similar. The transfer window was a bit messy and stuff. And so I think it's only really bearing fruit, though, since the end of September, really. We had that crucial game against Bournemouth, didn't we? And I think what you're seeing now is the product of a manager and a coaching staff putting their message to players and players understanding that message and understanding their roles in the team. Yeah, I think it might help you feel a little bit more motivated, but it does a disservice to Dyche and the players to say there's all the stuff going on there that's causing our good form at the moment. So 8 wins in 12 matches, something like that. And yeah, he's doing a great job at the moment, but I think the coaching staff are, and I think the players are as well. And top marks for everybody really over the last sort of 2 months now, isn't it? Really, yeah, excellent stuff, and Dyche deserves all the credit he's been getting.
It's quite interesting just on that, because obviously, remember after the Sheffield United game, that international break was back in the transfer window. Was he just lost all his players on transfer deadline day, and then obviously we had the Demarai Gray debacle. I remember around that time, Dyche probably seen it felt like he doesn't give much away in his press conferences. He's not a very emotional character, but it felt like at that point he was probably at his most subdued, like probably at his most rattled. And I think it was almost as in there was an element probably from him of realizing that things had been so unstable for so long for him that he was probably never going to get to a point of being in full control of everything that goes on at Everton. But as difficult as that period was, it was probably also a turning point, because once you realise that you're never going to have full control, then you can he often goes on about control the control, then you can set your stall out accordingly. And it feels like since that international break, since Demarai Gray left, things have probably been the most straightforward that they've been for Dyche since he came to Everton. The injury situations have been relatively stable. Obviously, there was no threat of anybody coming or going from the squad. And it's just enabled him to almost calm everything down and just rebuild. The season started probably 2 or 3 weeks too early for this Everton side. A couple of those awkward little injuries, like of McNeil, Dan Juma, Calvert-Lewin, Branthwaite to a certain extent at the start of the season. But since he's had the stability of knowing precisely what he's got to work with, things have only really got better and better. And like you said about Harrison, I think that's a really good point, because it was really noticeable, I thought, when we went to Crystal Palace a couple of weeks ago, and Eberechi Eze was just such a joy to watch, and the control that he had on that game, just picking up the ball and just running around, at the edge of the Everton box. It was just so notable that Everton don't have a player like that, haven't had for some time. But when Harrison was there last night, obviously you saw shades of that. It's not a natural position, but that through ball that Chris mentioned earlier, he played to Calvert-Lewin and didn't quite get a full power behind his shot. I mean, I've been doing this job since March of last year, and I can't remember many balls. Probably the only other player that I can remember who's had the ability to play that ball or division is probably Alex Iwobi, but he would only ever do it on fleeting occasions, and he often wasn't in that position where he could play as a number 10, which is probably his most natural one, and do things like that.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of both feet as well, hasn't he, Harrison? I think going back to the Dyche thing and picking up on your point, is this a small elephant in the room? I don't know. Is there a key? I don't know. It's an interesting discussion to be had, and goes back to what you're saying there. So, do you think because some of the turbulence off the pitch, for a number of reasons, as we well know, around the club is being taken away, and all there's still stuff to be sorted out at boardroom level, do we think that since that sort of quieting down, do you think that's helped Dyche and Thelwell in terms of doing their jobs? And there's a bit, it's quite stable there at the moment, and maybe some of the outside influences that were there previously maybe disappeared.
Well, there's been a lot of change and instability at the very top of the club, and what that probably has helped, Sean Dyche and Thelwell to almost kind of reassert their own positions really, and kind of start to. The results and the job that they're doing gives them increasing authority, and the better that they do, the more license they probably have to tell people in suits above them to say, no, this is our domain, the footballing side. You can concentrate on everything else. So it's probably less of a distraction.
Yeah. Because I just get the impression that, when you talk about who's the club now, and this is the way it should be really in football, that Dyche and tell whether the club.
Yeah. And that's the problem, what it's been for so long, isn't it?
And they haven't, the manager and the director of football for a long time, certainly since Mashiri come in, haven't. Yeah. I'm just wondering when that's helping them,
I remember when Dyche was first appointed, spoke to Malky Mackay, who was gave him his big break in coaching when Mackay was the manager at Watford, I think, and Dyche was his first team coach there, and he was talking about how he's seen him evolve as a manager. He said, should have got him years ago at Everton. He said he's such a great ambassador for the club. He's that strong presence. He's got that identity. We talked about Frank Lampard. That was one of the big questions, what a Frank Lampard team actually was. Frank obviously had his idea about what that should be and wasn't always borne out in the way they were playing. But, there's a lot of sort of stereotypes with Dyche, and he said himself, don't fight the box you're put into. But he gives them, rightly or wrongly, that particular identity, the certain values that he expects from his players. And I think that's Everton been crying out for years. Was it 8? He was the 8th manager in 7 years, and that managerial churn to just have the stability. I just hope, when the new owners do come in, if that is 777 or whoever it ends up being, like Joe just said, leave the football decisions to the football people. And I think that right at this moment in time, I'm not saying he's another Howard Kendall, but he's just what Everton need right now, in my opinion.
You make quite an intelligent point there as well, because you can be a very good ambassador and figurehead for a club in very different ways, can't you? And I think probably felt like Frank Lampard was the focal point that the Everton board wanted. Yeah. But Sean Dyche was the one that they needed. Frank Lampard was a very, very good ambassador for Everton Football Club, and the way in which he managed to unite the fans behind the team was a big part in helping Everton to stay up that season. Obviously, he's more of almost like a political ambassador, isn't he? More like a Gareth Southgate with England, where he says and does the right things, and he's quite savvy and tuned in to the optics of everything. Whereas Sean Dyche almost doesn't want to play that game at all. He just wants to focus on the football, and he almost wants to draw all the emotion out of it and just focus.
Football is results, because it's a results-driven business.
Yeah, but it's the methods in which you go by them results. As I said before, going from game to game, that's not sustainable, isn't it? You've got to put in place a structure and a plan that will increase your chances of getting results, and all that type of stuff. And you get the impression that Dyche, and I'll throw Thelwell into the mix here, I've got that at the moment. Okay, we may not have as we said many times on the pod, we may not have that wider squad that will give us a variety of options to deliver, across different matches and stuff and different opponents. But what they've got a good base to work with, which Dyche might say that's helpful, because it means you can just concentrate on everyone just doing the same job. But I think it's a lot more than just going from game to game. I think there have been occasions where we've done that this season, and that's not worked well. Arsenal at home and Brighton at home will be two matches where we've done that. It'd be interesting if we played Arsenal on Sunday, whether we'd have the same tactics as what we did as Arsenal early on the season. So I think, it's about results, but you've got that, as I say, Conor, you've got to have that strategy in place, haven't you, to deliver them over several months, and I think we've got that at the moment, especially away from home, and hopefully after last night at home as well.
Chris, Damien Hogan watching on Facebook believes Ashley Young played really well last night, but I think the moment of the night was Beto's celebration when he scored that third goal. And maybe this is the Evertonian in me a little bit, perhaps. When you see the VAR check was going on and it looks a bit tight, you start thinking, I hope that celebration and the smile wasn't all in vain and it's going to get chalked off by our friends at Stockley Park. But it wasn't to be the case. And for once, VAR was on Everton's side and Beto was able to celebrate what he has described as a magical moment for him.
Yeah, I observed myself. It was, I mean, Joe and I were tucked up in bed at this point. But on the Echo had the sports Christmas do on Monday night, and Conor O'Neill was leading the karaoke charge, and a lot of finger pointing was going on with the showman that he is. And Beto almost reminded me of Conor there from the video footage that I've seen, the way he was pointing that finger. No, it was a great moment, wasn't it? And I've been saying all along, he just needs that first one. He hit the ground running with coming off the bench just 24 hours after he signed, scoring at Doncaster Rovers. But then, obviously Premier League defences have been much tougher than playing against League Two opponents. And while he's been plenty of good running, hard running from Beto, maybe not always had that composure. The big chance he missed at Forest at the weekend. So that's probably one of the reasons why Dominic Calvert-Lewin went straight back in. But it was lovely to see, and you just felt for him as that VAR check. I mean, I don't know what the time was, if you get the stopwatch out, which seemed a long time in the moment for him to wait to get that confirmed. But it wasn't just it's happened. Gav said before, it was a great finish, but it was not like he didn't have anything to do, did he? He still had quite a long way to go, but he was just a force of nature, wasn't he, bursting through there, and he ended up megging the keeper in the end. But yeah, it was a love moment. I just got to hope that it's the first of many for him, because obviously he's Everton's biggest signing of the summer in terms of his transfer fee at a time when funds are tight, and there's that expectation on him. Calvert-Lewin, I think, does remain the main man up front, but Beto is a decent alternative there. And it was interesting before the game, Sean Dyche actually said that he sees them as actually very different players. I mean, because they're a couple of big men. A lot of people, certainly a lot more of a like-for-like alternative than Neil Maupay ever was. But Dyche explained, he thinks they're actually quite different sort of skill sets, and they offers Everton a chance to mix things up. And over the course of a season, he's a decent alternative.
Joe, Mark asks on Facebook, do Everton have a clause in Jack Harrison's loan agreement in which they'll be able to buy him? I think if we see performances like we've seen last night, then them questions are going to grow, and people are going to be asking that more and more.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Jack Harrison and his kind of long-term future at Everton, if there is one, it's probably less dependent on what Everton do this season and more dependent on what Leeds do this season, because I think the way in which those talks have gone on, I think if Leeds don't come up, then I think it becomes he's Everton's player if they want him. If they do come up, then obviously they're going to reassess what their options are in their squad build. We know that they've got a lot of wingers there already, Willie Nonto being one of them, who Everton were after so rigorously in the summer. But with that one, I think it's clear that Sean Dyche likes him, clear that Kevin Farewell likes him. They identified him and Dan Juma as two of the best loan players available on that market this summer. Obviously, one is working out far better than the other, but I think that it's very clear that Harrison has what it takes to be a Dyche player, success under Dyche, and I don't think every player has that. So I think if Everton are going to stay up, I think Touchwood would be something mad would have to happen. They're a relegation side by technicality only. That's why they're in, because of what happens on paper, not on the pitch. If Leeds come up, then I think there'll be an assessment there as to how vital he might be to their attempt to stay in the Premier League. If they don't come up, I think he's Everton's if they want him. It's basically a way of. That's my understanding of the situation. I don't know the precise nature of the contract and what clauses are there, but I think that's what will happen. So we'll have to wait and see. But he's had a good impact there. Obviously, got a number of assists, and he's chipping in, and that was a brilliant moment for Beto. Just really pleased for him. But I think that Beto's probably been one of those players who loses out from Dyche's preference not to make substitutions, because there are probably lots of situations where he probably would have benefited from having the last half an hour of a game. All right, he's a different player to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but he enables Everton to play in the same way. They don't have to change anything tactically if he comes on. He did well against Doncaster, played well against Sheffield United, was very good in the first half against Brentford, laid the foundation for the win, which was Dominic Calvert-Lewin's return. And obviously he scored the third goal. I wrote a piece before the game on Thursday night, just saying about how the easy thing from Saturday would be to focus on Beto's miss, because he should have scored. Obviously, that would have played on his mind. But really, the bigger story about Beto was the fact that he'd enabled Dyche to go to Nottingham and play the same way that he wanted to play. And as a result, that Everton got a win. It was Dyche's 5th Premier League away win of the season. It was, as Everton boss. It was the first Premier League away win that he's had where Dominic Calvert-Lewin wasn't involved. And, said this a number of times on this pod and in writing, but there's an element with Beto where scoring goals almost isn't the main priority for him. It's making sure that when Dominic Calvert-Lewin isn't available or needs a rest, that the other 10 players can do the same jobs that they're supposed to be doing and making any changes as as easy to accommodate as possible. If he can add goals, then that'd be brilliant. And he did ever so well for that goal. I mean, Nathan Patterson will get the assist on the record books, but I mean, you won't get many more generous assists than that. Yeah, and every player got a mark. But it's I'm not sure if Dwight McNeil got a touch on the second goal, but I mean, if Dwight McNeil and Nathan Patterson both come away with assists from that game, then, like they would have been very, very generous. Not that we all care, but lots and lots of positives. Harrison is one to take from the whole season so far. I think if Leeds stay down, I think he's an Everton player in the summer.
It is December though, gents, and it means that Premier League football comes thick and fast. And unfortunately, we're not allowed to bask too much in the glory of Thursday night's win over Newcastle, as Chelsea visit Goodison Park on Sunday. Jason Fisher asks, who's watching online, would you start the same team on Sunday, or would you bring James Garner back in?
I was just thinking about that during the pod, because I know you're going to talk about Chelsea. When you say don't change your winning team.
I can say this now because we're recording. It's 20-1, and we did the Chelsea press conference after the Newcastle game.
And
it was embargoed until 10 minutes ago. So it's probably just a set about. So James Garner sickness bug. Dyche hopes it's 24 hours, and he'll be available for Chelsea. Amadou Onana in contention for the squad. Going to be assessed over the coming days, but he's very close to being back in contention for Chelsea. And then Seamus Coleman will be assessed today, but again, hopefully it's minor. So
so notwithstanding that, I think Coleman, if he's a little maybe an issue, but don't change your winning team. I think like Chelsea, I think they struggle sometimes playing off from the back like Newcastle did last night, and I'd go with the same team. I quite like Harrison playing that number 10 role, so that's certainly. Whatever you do elsewhere, I think that would be something that I would like to preserve, because I think it gives us an extra edge at home. And there might be some issues, but regarding Coleman, but I think never change your winning team. He played well last night. If I'd been the Everton team last night and I'm dropped for Sunday, I'd be a bit round off at the manager, to be honest with you, for want of a better phrase.
Be knocking on his door, would you?
I'd take a lot of bottles. Knock on Dyche.
Hey, he likes it. Ellis Sims did it. He likes it when people come to him.
And was subsequently sold.
And not many people do.
I'd probably not do that. But if he can do, I know what Joe's saying about possible injury with Coleman and his fitness and stuff. Now, keep the same team and take it from there would be my plan for Sunday.
Bees, if you was Sean Dyche, are you going to be having any difficult conversations with players between now and Sunday?
I'm torn now, because I'd want to get James Garner, or Jimmy Garner as the gaffer calls him, back in there if at all possible. But Gav's made some good points there, and certainly about Jack Harrison. I'd somehow try and get James Garner back in there, but I mean, you could do that, but it's an interesting one, isn't it? If he does, because then you're saying, how do you change things in central midfield? Because obviously I don't think you're going to have Harrison and Doucoure sort of playing off the striker. So I'm a bit torn. Maybe it'll be that because of the illness, maybe you just substitute something like that, because it is a quick turnaround. Isn't it? But it's a headache. But it's good that they've actually finally got a potential to have this scenario, because too often this season the team's been picking itself, isn't it? It's nice to actually say, actually there's a couple of alternatives in there.
Joe, the visit of Richard Pochettino's side will just present Everton with a really good opportunity to build on that momentum that they've been building in recent weeks and make it 3 wins on the bounce, because I know we don't like to harp on about it, but take the 10-point deduction out the equation, and Everton and Chelsea are neck and neck on the table.
Well, they'd be above Chelsea, it'd be incredible. Chelsea that spent £1 billion in free transfer windows, and just going back to the last point, I bring James Garner back in. I think he'd bring more control than Abdoulaye Doucoure does. Doucoure played very well, but I think Garner would have more control on the ball and just protect the defence a little bit better. I think it would free Doucoure up to press high on that Chelsea side that struggled to play out. And I also think that the way Chelsea would line up, they have a bit of fragility on the left side of the defence at the moment. They got Cucurella, who can't quite nail down the place and is a bit frantic. And they're playing Colwell out there, who's really a centre back a fair bit as well. So I'd like to have a natural winger in Harrison having a go at that bit and trying to really punish him and get behind that last man and get the balls into Calvert-Lewin and hopefully an on-rushing Doucoure. It's a real opportunity. Chelsea have some wonderful players. How can you not if you spend that much money? They're also a side in transition and they're there to be got at, and it will follow the same pattern that Dyche's Everton seem to follow all the time. I think really, if Everton get the first goal, I imagine it will give them too much momentum and cause too much disbelief in Chelsea for Chelsea to come back at them. Chelsea get the first goal, they've probably got the quality there to hold on, depending on how they play the game. I don't think Pochettino's doing a bad job at Chelsea. I think he's inherited an absolute mess of a situation, and he somehow and they've got a big injury list as well. But this is still a good time to play them, I think, and it's also a free hit for Everton now. I think
if you brought Garner in, who would you drop then?
I brought Garner in. It becomes so Harrison moves out to the right. So it's who's starting at right back, Coleman or Young? And if Coleman's fit, I start Coleman. If he's not, then for all I say about Nathan Patterson, obviously Young's played well in 2 games in which they kept clean sheets in a row now. So probably move Young back to right back.
And with that revelation, that was exactly like House Heart and seeing Jack Harrison play the number 10 job.
Yeah, I just think it's something that we've been missing for a while, and I saw lots of stuff last night that I've not really seen from an Everton team, especially at home, for a while. And he's got the right bit. He's got that classic build for the number 10, hasn't he? But not the tallest. He's sort of quite low centre of gravity. I just think he's ideal. And I'm not sure whether he might have played at Leeds and stunk the house out for all I know. I don't know. But I just give us something last night that I don't think we've had. It was immediately apparent in the game. But as Joe said, Chelsea may set up differently and they may want to target the left-hand side and may want to move our strength onto our right. So we'll see. But it gives us an option anyway going forward, doesn't it?
Before we move on to predictions for Chelsea, Ed the Blue, watching on Facebook, says Dyche has done a great job transforming the mentality. And John Herrera, who's watching from Texas, John, hello.
Hey, John.
He says, is it true?
Early start there, yeah.
Is it true Branthwaite being linked with a move to Spurs? That's something that we spoke about yesterday, Joe, wasn't it, before the game? Because there have been rumours linking Branthwaite with Tottenham.
Yeah, Branthwaite's the biggest story of Everton's January. I think Everton aren't going to have a lot of money to spend, regardless of whether or not the takeover gets approved or not. It's going to be a question of where are Everton financially, how stable are things. There may well be. Jared Branthwaite is a future England captain. He has gone from, in the summer, he was in the squad that won the under 21 Euros, but obviously he was behind Taylor Bellis, Harwood, and he was behind Levi Colwell. I think he's leapfrogged them now with everything that he's done in the past few months, and it's clear that he's a fantastic player. Physically, we know he's very good. The way in which he just brushed off Fabian Schär and Bruno Guimaraes at the end of the game yesterday, so he tried to get to Pickford. He just didn't even have to think about stopping them in their tracks. The way he was so dominant aerially against Alexander Isak, and obviously the pace that he has as well, coupled with the ball at his feet, left-footed centre back. He says he's left-footed and right-footed, but he tends to play with his left. He will be at the top of the wish list of pretty much certainly every major English club. Man United needs centre-backs. Arsenal will probably welcome their. Spurs definitely need centre-backs. Chelsea go for every hot prospect under the sun. So the question for Everton, I think, will probably be, where are they financially, and do they need to be willing to listen to offers? Because I think this might be, and we spoke about this on the pod before, this might, depending on how things go with takeovers, there's a lot of uncertainty about Everton's future. One way in which things could play out is that things stabilise quite dramatically from early next year onwards, and all of a sudden Everton go less about Anthony Gordon, how much can they get for him, less about Richarlison, less about selling Iwobi and Cannon on deadline day, and more about proper sustainable planning for the future. January might be the last chance that a club can come to Everton and potentially get a player for a bit cheaper than they probably would do normally. Maybe get him for, if they put £50 million in for Branthwaite, it might turn a few heads this time round, but Everton can survive to the summer. He's probably an £80 million plus player. I think he's that good. Amadou Onana is probably another one to watch on that front. So it's going to be really interesting. Spurs obviously are really keen, but like we said last night, it's interesting. I would assume that every big club, with the exception of Liverpool, probably because of the relationship there, will probably be watching Branthwaite and want him and be thinking about making a move for him. With Spurs, the noise that's coming out of Spurs is really interesting. So on the one hand, they got that they're after Branthwaite. On the other hand, there are credible rumours from one of our colleagues down in Football London that they're also interested in Ben Godfrey. Now, there is a huge amount of disparity there, which suggests that in their search for trying to sort things out at centre-back, they're looking at relatively young players who are cheap and easily available to potential, international captains of the future. So I think they're probably casting their net far and wide. So I would assume that they're interested. I would assume that there will be big interest. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bid from someone for Branthwaite in January. Hopefully Everton are in a position where they can turn it down because, he is clearly a very, very good player and he's one for the future.
Yeah, Nomad Scouts Watchers on Facebook says 150 million for Branthwaite. And while I don't maybe think 150 million, I do think he is very quickly turned into 100 million plus. I
think so. I think if Everton can, and maybe they will have found it by January. If Everton can get to a position of reasonable financial security, then I don't see why they couldn't turn. They couldn't put £100 million price tag on him.
I think as well that the big thing with Branthwaite, Chris, is that when you look at him now, his performances, it's just the norm, isn't it? But he's still so good. I mean, like last night he was faultless again. Yeah. But you just become used to it now. It's not, you don't get excited by it anymore because it's just what you come to expect from him.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing we want to do is dominate, a podcast after a result like that about selling Jared Branthwaite. We don't want to be sort of setting that precedent. But yeah, in terms of a potential price tag, if they can, like as Joe says, avoid having to flog him at a relative cut price in January. Yeah, I think you are talking the potential for a 9-figure fee. Moises Caicedo, 110 million to Chelsea. When you look at Branthwaite, the English premium, the fact that he's an absolute specimen. He was 6'5". He's a man mountain. I said cut Wood down to size at Forest. He felled Wood at the Forest on Saturday. He's described as a man mountain. He's more like a gentle hill when Jared Branthwaite had finished with him. It's because, like I say, it's becoming the norm. As is my puns. But yeah, the sky's the limit. I mean, as Joe says, it's not too fanciful to, he continues on this trajectory. To say that he's a potential England captain, certainly he's probably ahead. He's certainly ahead of where John Stones was, at his relative stage of his career. I mean, obviously a slightly different sort of centre back in the way they both play the game. But yeah, incredible. It is becoming the norm, and it's getting the best out of both of them. Tarkowski and an absolute competitor alongside him. He didn't need the armband to show he's a defensive leader last night. Obviously, he ended up with it once Coleman went off. But that bone crunching challenge in the first half, Gladys Street loved that, didn't they? And between them, they're a really good partnership for Dyche.
I think big for Mikalenko as well. I think
it should be clear as well when we're not trying to sell Jared.
Yeah, we're on Facebook, but not Facebook Marketplace.
We're not pitching them for an auction or anything like that.
We're paying them a compliment. That's the thing, isn't it? Inevitably, you end up set. We're saying he's £100 million, whatever. We're paying him a compliment there. We're paying the club a compliment, aren't we? Because it's great recruitment.
I don't want to do us down, but I don't think Spurs' scouts are getting to the 45th minute of this podcast.
You never know. But it's a natural thing, isn't it? It's an interesting comparison with Stones. I know you want to move on, but Stones was sold after he'd had 2.5 years at Everton. Branthwaite's only had half season, as the if that. So it's you have that might be the thing that puts clubs off. They might want to give him a season before they spend money.
That'll be the biggest indicator of where this club is behind the scenes when we get to January, I think, because if there is any sense that Branthwaite can be got at by a club, then I would be astonished if someone didn't try and come in for him.
Just one quick one, Joe, before we finish. Mark asks on Facebook, is there any update on the 777 takeover?
We're going through the motions. Nice, easy one to finish off then. It's just obviously the regulatory bodies are going through the paperwork. 777 expressed some confidence it'd be done before the end of this year. So obviously we're running out. We've got 3 weeks left. I think the reality is, it's all going on behind closed doors. So I can't, if I'm honest with you, I can't give a firm update. Otherwise, it's just a wait and see at the moment. So, like we said recently, I think if the Premier League pay as much rigor to their finances as they have to Everton's finances in relation to the points deduction, then it could be quite an interesting little scrutiny process into 777, because there are a lot of questions. Certainly in the public domain, there are far more questions than answers around them and what their plans are and how they'd fund Everton. They were again had a presence, or the representatives had a presence at Goodison again for Newcastle. We know that the points deduction isn't something that was necessarily going to put them off, nor was necessarily a relegation battle. I think that they'll be heartened and probably be believing that neither of those things are going to be an issue this season with the way things are going, and it'll probably strengthen them a little bit, because they're not a unit that comes in and pumps money into the transfer coffers of the clubs that they go into. So it may well be a little bit of relief from them that if they do get approval, they're not coming into January with Everton 6 points adrift and maybe needing to dip into some money to try and find some inspiration from elsewhere. That doesn't look like it's going to be necessary at the moment. They had a big boost on Thursday night with Vasco da Gama, who were one of their other clubs in their portfolio. They stayed up on the last day of the season. They got a good win, which meant that they stayed in Brazil Serie A, so they consolidated their place, I think, and promoted the season before. But yeah, if I'm being honest, I can't give you a precise update as to where it is, but we would expect an announcement at some point in the coming weeks, bearing in mind the time frame that they set.
Just before we get on to predictions, Chris Beesley has the chance for Royal Blue listeners to get their hands on some Everton programmes.
Yeah, we discussed this the other day. If you're willing to come down to Echo Towers here at St Paul's Square.
And contrary to unpopular belief, we are based in Liverpool, not Manchester.
Yeah.
We should get that out there.
Yeah, you don't have to go to the back end of Oldham to collect this. Liverpool City Centre. Not just this one from last night, but there's plenty of them there. There's probably would retail at over £100 in total if you were to buy them all. Programs, Everton programs, home and away for the last couple of seasons. So everyone who's sent us a comment, sent us a question today, you'll go into a draw, and then we'll pick one of you out, and if you can get yourself down there, is a nice little early Christmas present for you.
And before we finish, because we could shoot the fast for even longer, but we have got work to do, and Gav's going out tonight, so
Gav's going out this afternoon. Gav's going out in about 5 minutes. Yeah.
Back out in Chester, isn't it? Painting Chester blue.
No.
We do need to wrap things up, so we will finish as we always do on a Friday with our predictions for Chelsea. Joe, I'll kick things off with you.
2-0.
2-0. Bees.
1-11.
Gav?
1-0 Everton.
I'll go 2-1 Everton. And Ian Kroll behind the camera, what are you going
for?
1-1.
Oh.
That's why he's sitting
like the Grinch there, wasn't he?
They put him at a full house there.
Yeah.
Ian instead sat on the fence. But we will be back on Monday to look back on the game over Chelsea and look ahead to a big week for Everton as they head to Turf Moor a week on Saturday. But thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for watching on Facebook Live. We've been the Royal Blue Podcast.